DeepSeek. Now, I think people heard a little bit about it, but they certainly saw the impact of DeepSeek's announcement of a new AI product, its effect on the market, especially Nvidia. I mean, the stock market lost $1 trillion on the announcement, and Nvidia lost what, 680 billion? Wow, that was the greatest loss in the history of the market. Hi, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Good, Mike. Good to see you.
So you had a big story today. Tesla announced they're going to actually bring out that electric cab.
Yeah, in their earning reports, Musk said they're going to start with the autonomous taxi service, first in Texas. That's the plan around June. And it's interesting. It's been a big week for tech earnings. Tesla had lower sales revenue, all that stuff, and yet the stock went way up. I think people are looking ahead, perhaps, to the robotic nature and autonomous driving, almost like a what's ahead. And isn't that why people buy stocks? Because of what they think is going to happen in the future. And so even though Tesla missed on some of those numbers, its stock went up.
Yeah, they were kind of a hit at CES with that long train of Tesla vehicles acting as taxis to move people from one building to the next at the show in Vegas. So this is sort of like the next step. Is this threaten Waymo in a big way?
It could, except Waymo has such a big head start. But certainly, I think it would be competition, and there was competition. It was sort of Cruise versus Waymo. Cruise had too many incidents, so it left San Francisco and sort of back to the drawing board, leaving Waymo there. Waymo is relatively smooth. They haven't had that many incidents. It's not only something that local people are doing, almost like a Lyft or an Uber now, just hitting the app and taking a driverless taxi, but it's certainly one of the top things, at least for me, when people visit this area, that they want to do.
Yeah, a member of my family went on a date around San Francisco on Waymo, and they said it was wonderful, that they weren't concerned at all. They felt safe. They actually felt safer than with a crazy taxi driver.
It used to be a horse-drawn carriage that was romantic to go around a city. Now it's a driverless cab.
What other earnings reports? Apple had a interesting week because even though sales of his products are threatened in China, it beat all of its expectations on the street.
Yeah, Apple has done what a lot of big companies do. Think IBM. It's not so much about products. It's also largely about services. And that's where IBM, which recently hit all-time highs on its recent earnings report this week, but Apple is sort of moving in that direction too. A lot of services is, a lot of revenue from services, not just the iPhones. And that's well-timed, which is, what Tim Cook is good at, timing everything just right, because we almost expect phones to sell a little more slowly. We just have so many on the market. The changes have become incremental. Certainly China and the US are in sort of a cold business war. And so for Apple to come in and say, hey, we're still making a lot of money, we're just doing it in a different way, really makes sense at this point.
Yeah, but I did notice, despite beating the street, its shares went down just a tiny amount.
I mean, I think they stayed pretty steady. If you look at after hours action, it was up about $6. That's a little less than 3%. And I think that shows investors are looking ahead and saying, aha, it doesn't just have to be iPhones. I think even a few years ago, if iPhone numbers had come in short, it wouldn't have mattered what else happened. Apple would have struggled and investors would have panicked. But now you can have iPhones come in a little shy of expectations and still see the stock move up a bit after hours.
Okay, so let's move on to what is the biggest story, I think, of the week. DeepSeek. Now, I think people heard a little bit about it, but they certainly saw the impact of DeepSeek's announcement of a new AI product, its effect on the market, especially NVIDIA. I mean, the stock market lost $1 trillion on the announcement, and NVIDIA lost what, 680 billion? Wow, that was the greatest loss in the history of the market.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the biggest gains and the biggest losses. NVIDIA has now cornered that market. The biggest single day loss prior to Monday was $290 billion. That was NVIDIA. NVIDIA more than doubled that off of the concern about DeepSeek. And just so many questions. I mean, we know that NVIDIA has been restricted in terms of chips it can sell to China. But did DeepSeek use NVIDIA chips? In other words, could this have been a victory lap for NVIDIA instead of a $600 billion loss?
Yeah, some people are saying it might be, but there's so many questions about this company. First of all, we know that it was founded out of a hedge fund, and it appears to have essentially done what Japanese companies did to gain market share 30 years ago, which was they reversed engineered ChatGPT and the other US AI products, reverse engineer them, and they're not sure if they did it with older NVIDIA chips or they managed to get around the embargo and use new ones. I mean, there's a million questions about this, but apparently, I mean, that's one part of it, but you've got to train your AI system. And that I know that OpenAI spent $100 million training their chat product. And these guys apparently did it for $5 million.
I mean, you really can't believe what
its metrics are equal to ChatGPT. I mean, what the hell's going on?
I think the short answer is that we don't know. It's a Chinese company. They're not open to us. We don't know. They're not obviously publicly traded, nor are they simply public because it's a Chinese company. So we don't know, and therefore can't really hang our hats on anything DeepSeek is saying. There is some irony in OpenAI saying, oh my goodness, this company has taken our data, our information, and used it without us knowing it. I mean, of all the companies to say that, OpenAI, I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah.
But even that aside,
it's taking everybody else's information. Yeah.
Even that aside, it's just, there is this fog between what we know about Chinese companies and what we don't know. And so we really don't know what DeepSeek is all about. Nonetheless, you know, some were calling this a Sputnik moment. I think that may be over.
Mark Andreessen, the great VC, said that this is America's Sputnik moment.
Yeah, not sure about that, but that was another case where we saw technology from another country and said, whoa, they're beating us. We have to step up our game. And we had some of the same calls earlier this week when DeepSeek became the #1 app in the Apple App Store.
Yeah, I'm old enough that I was at 2 of these Sputnik moments. I was actually standing in the street as a 4-year-old or 3-year-old in Virginia, looking up at this night sky, watching Sputnik fly over. And within a couple of years, they were teaching us science all day long in our schools. The next one was when Ed Hayes showed up and gave that presentation at the Semiconductor Industry Association, I think in '84, where he showed the quality of American chips and the quality of Japanese chips and set off that war. And it led to Congress getting involved, Bob Noyce going back to Washington and getting support on embargoes and controls and all that. Is that going to happen this time? I don't see how you stop these guys. They don't seem to be breaking any laws. They're actually making the product free, and it's going to be open source because they say that adds to innovation and draws in top talent. I mean, it just seems like this is one of those 10x moments where somebody comes out with a product that's 10x better than anything in the world, and they just set fire to the landscape, and everybody's starting to compete. The stock market has to readjust, and companies are born and disappear. I mean, is this that kind of a moment, you think? Or is
it might be? It might be, but you also have to take into account that AI and the ChatGPTs of the world are already to a certain point. So it's not like, hey, we really need to start with this technology. I think the lesson from this might be maybe we've been overspending. Maybe we don't need chips this expensive. Maybe we don't need to fund this stuff quite as heavily because maybe AI is a technology that we don't have to spend as much money on. And that is in itself also an interesting, splash of cold water.
Yeah, the New York Times went around and asked a whole bunch of Silicon Valley VCs that put big money in AI, how they're feeling right now. And some of them said, it sets a new market, a high point in the market, and we're going to go after it. And our companies that we invested in, our other ones lost a lot of sleep because they had put they're taking a lot of money out of their funds and stuck it in these firms. And now there's a Walmart just hit town, and all the department stores are in big trouble.
And time will tell what the ultimate reaction is. But right off the gate, I mean, we already have more money being thrown at the problem. OpenAI, according to CNBC, in talks to raise even more money. It would value it at $340 billion, which is a staggering amount for a startup, call it what it is. But that's a whole lot of money. And so the reaction to this right away has been, hey, let's fight back and let's add more money to this. But I think one of the interesting things about DeepSeek, if they're telling anywhere near the truth, is that they were able to do this for so much less money.
Yeah, it's impressive. But as some people pointed out, this was inevitable. Once you get these founding products out there, somebody's going to clone them. Somebody's going to just build a new product on top of what they've already done and, take the market away for a while. I read a really good analysis in Platformer by a guy named Casey Newton. And he not only looked at the product, but he said, what are the reasons to worry about this product, about DeepSeek? And he said, well, no one really knows what their long-term game is. They don't even seem to have a business plan yet. Where are they going with this? What's the point? Is this a Chinese government CCP-backed initiative to find the replacement for TikTok, an even more powerful one where everything we do gets taken in by another country? So we don't know. The hedge fund's 10 years old, and it seems to come out of nowhere. It also shows the second thing we have to worry about is the big AI labs don't seem to have much of a moat, that all their intellectual property seems to have gotten taken, which says that they better speed up and get ahead of this again, or they better start protecting their assets. They were leaving pretty high and pretty easy. Another one is DeepSeek's success will lead more people to see AI as an arms race against China. That this could be we've got the Sputnik moment. I remember the insanity. The Russians are going to be on the moon. They're going to own space, and we're going to have to spend billions of dollars, which might be a lot of support for Stargate. And he says, the last one, the fear is the more that people believe AI is in an existential race against China, the less safely it will be built. That we'll be building these things willy-nilly without worrying about privacy and secrecy and that sort of thing, because we've just got to beat the Russians to the moon. We got to beat China in AI. He said reasons for calm. Everyone basically already assumed that somebody was going to clone these products. They were too wide open. Tech companies can still find a good use for all these capital expenditures. The export controls seem to have helped, at least slow the other side down. And American AI labs are still in the lead. They're still spending billions of dollars advancing this technology, including NVIDIA. Another factor that was pointed out elsewhere was that the NVIDIA already knew they were going to have competitors, and they even came out and said, "Well, we kind of welcome competition. It will keep us honest." I don't know if that's really the case or that's just sour grapes, but it's an interesting notion.
Yeah,
And then and finally, one other thing I want to add before you comment. I took up 5 minutes of our time, but computing power. Everyone thought that it was going to be NVIDIA chips that were going to be the gating function on rolling out the AI revolution. How fast could NVIDIA build these things? But now it appears that it's might be computing power. How much computing power is going to be needed for all of this learning and gathering up information and managing all the uses of AI at the same time? And America is ahead on that, partly because of Biden's, green project, his CHIPS Act, that we're actually building this stuff, and we could stay ahead of China with by having greater computing power to do this, to design these things, to operate them, to run the data centers, that sort of thing. What do you think? I mean, it's still early, but any thoughts?
yeah, those are all legitimate questions, all very good points. Casey Newton's my guy. He's among the best to do this, and it all makes sense. Are we in an age where these companies need to panic? Maybe they should. If there's more AI out there and it's cheaper and it's not all in the hands of 3 or 4 big companies, who wins? The consumer wins. If
Yes.
this turns out to be a consumer product, consumers win if there's more competition. But we just don't know if it comes from China because we don't really know what China's doing and with whose chips and at what cost. And more of that needs to become transparent and public before we really either panic or celebrate.
Yeah, I think we mollified ourselves with the notion, well, they can't do the really precise high-end semiconductor technology, so we don't have to worry. But they apparently built this thing not as much on the latest NVIDIA chips, but a generation old NVIDIA chips, which suggests that we may have actually, by putting controls on trade with China on this stuff, we may have actually lit a fire under Chinese innovation. They seem to have created this thing from, it's like building an airplane out of chewing gum wrappers. They managed to put it together in an interesting way that has surprised everyone.
I mean, 2 pushbacks on that would be to say, A, that fire was lit generations ago.
Yeah.
And 2, we don't know. Again, we don't know if they put it together with chewing gum. We have no idea. They may have put it together with full-on brand new blown out NVIDIA chips that NVIDIA can't declare. And yet, what a weird day if it is that case, because NVIDIA, well, we can't say anything. Meanwhile, we're watching our stock value tank by the biggest single day loss in history. It's got to be a weird emotional.
We talked about this a month or so ago, how some of these NVIDIA chips are going to Saudi Arabia and other places, and then going from there into China. So
possibly, yeah.
So until we can get our actual hands on it, we don't really know what they've accomplished here. It could be a prodigious feat of innovation, or it could just be copycat. We'll see. Meanwhile, NVIDIA's out $680 billion. Wow. Okay. The Justice Department. Once again, I'm gonna chide you because remember nobody's talking about HP anymore. Well, now the Justice Department is suing to block a $14 billion Juniper Networks buyout by Hewlett Packard Enterprises. If HP is so unimportant, what's the Justice Department doing getting involved in this acquisition? Is this really an antitrust violation? I mean, Juniper Networks was a hot company, but it hasn't been hot for a few years now, and HP hasn't been hot since Bill and Dave died. So, what do you think?
I mean, you answered your own question. Remember all those conversations you had last week about the pending deal between Juniper and HP?
Yep.
How many? Probably 0.
Yeah.
And that's how much news it made. And so I don't know why the deal was blocked, but maybe because they're doing very similar business at this point. And so even though the two have seen better days, it's still a large deal. But it's something to watch. It's just something that hadn't been on many people's radar until the deal got blocked.
Yeah, one of the comments by HP Enterprise was, I guess it was a joint company statement said, the combined company will actually produce more innovation and choice, change the dynamics of the networking market, and create more competition, not less. Which kind of actually, I'm usually against, antitrust trust monopolies, but that actually sounds kind of right with this one because those two companies, uh, they may get some value from scale because they neither one have been real innovators for the last years.
Right. And often you see sort of, ahead of a death rattle, hey, let's consolidate, let's try to bring these things together. Although I would worry that may lead to layoffs, but it may also lead to a slightly longer lifespan. But I do remember, I mean, Juniper was at one point really the hottest company,
Yeah.
or among the hottest companies in the networking world and the dot-com boom. So much technology was based on those routers. They really gave Cisco a run for their money.
Yeah. Okay. Mark Zuckerberg, in a private email to Meta employees, uh, just it's a leaked email, told them to buckle up for an intense 2025. What do you think that means?
I think there's going to be a lot of criticism of Meta because it has decided not to have really any standards anymore. Zuckerberg is,
As if they ever really did.
I mean, they pretended at it, and now they're not even pretending. Zuckerberg has gone over to the MAGA side, which is kind of surprising given that he's rich enough to do whatever he wants. He's kowtowing to Trump. He's apparently going to pay for some lawsuit to settle after knocking Trump off the site, which was his decision and nothing illegal about it. So clearly,
Yeah.
he is trying to curry favor with the new administration. And I know that has upset, I know personally that has upset a lot of Facebook employees. And so he's probably telling them, you're just seeing the beginning of this.
Yeah, what's interesting is simultaneously that I read an article trying to figure out who were the winners and the losers with the arrival of DeepSeek, and one of the winners was Meta. That
Right.
because it hasn't really gone deep into the AI space, it can get this new product cheap.
Well,
You know,
Meta is also, with its Llama AI offering, making a bid for open source.
yeah,
DeepSeek, and one of the reasons DeepSeek kind of freaked people out, is also open source.
of course.
So you have Meta saying this could be the way to go, and investors are rewarding that. And that was an interesting move to make it open source like that. Some people had said this could cost you. But meanwhile, Meta shareholders have made tens of billions of dollars
Yeah.
in the last few days.
Apple was also listed as one of the potential winners from all of this. I mean, it's interesting that folks who didn't leap on the AI bandwagon may turn out to be the big winners on this, while Google was listed as one of the potential losers on this.
It's hard to say. I mean, Apple is sort of a deliverer of AI.
Yeah.
So if AI becomes, like what I said a little earlier, if it becomes cheaper and easier to get and there's more competition, that's good for consumers. Apple is a company that delivers directly to consumers via its iPhone and other devices. So they stand to win in this sort of a battle. Google, it's hard to tell. They've always been put at the top when it comes to AI because they're so fast with it and the search engine, of it all. But I don't know if maybe because it is a search company, if AI gets cheaper and faster, maybe they win because there are more choices for you to search because they too sort of deliver AI to the consumer.
Well, the great Dr. Gordon Moore always said that first into a market and early adopters tend to get all the arrows in the back.
Right.
Uh, I wonder if this is a case of that everyone's so anxious to get on board that they didn't account for the idea of a second generation of clones that would be a hell of a lot cheaper.
I mean, they should have, but meanwhile, they were making a lot of money along the way.
Yeah. Okay. So We talked about Apple. Finally, economic growth in the United States slowed at the end of last year as trade and investment declined and the hurricanes and labor strikes. But interestingly enough, it expanded at an annual rate of 2.3% between October and December, down from 3.1. But you know what was holding up the economy? Bless them. You and me. Consumer spending, we're still spending like crazy out there, and it rose 4.2%. God bless us all for keeping this economy together while everything else seems to be manufacturing outputs down. It's interesting that all the other indicators are slipping still. And we consumers are out there still hitting the stores and going on Amazon. And I mean, the number of Amazon, UPS, maybe not UPS for long, and other trucks delivering in my neighborhood has not slowed down. It has actually seemed to have increased the last couple months since Christmas. So, keep it up, America. We're holding the U.S. economy up in a good way. So, okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area. Look for his big stories. And hear me regularly on the BBC World Radio show Business Matters. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.